Dr. John Bruni, how are you?
I'm good, Jeremy.
Hang on, I'll turn you on.
I'm good, Jeremy. Hey, that's deja vu, isn't it?
How's the tea?
The tea is perfect.
Good. Mm-hmm. Are you going to be watching the great debate in a little while?
I am so looking forward to it, Jeremy. It's going to be one of the highlights. Although there's another one which I'm not sure whether your listeners are going to be watching. There is a sort of YouTube-like thing called Merit Street. I don't know if you guys know about it, but
No.
It's run by Dr. Phil, and he's doing an interview of RFK Jr. If anyone ever thought that anyone in the US political firmament was batshit, crazy, I'll take a walk back from that one. I'm sorry, audience. I have to behave myself. But if anyone thought that there was someone that was slightly unhinged, that would be an interesting one to sort of compare against the two unhinged candidates we will be seeing in about an hour's time.
Well, he might have, RFK Jr. might have been entitled if he had, more supporters or a better chance of winning. But
allegedly, Jeremy, he had enough support. He is the most supported independent candidate in US political history since Ross Perot. That's
really?
33 years ago.
But they're saying that they just don't have enough money and things are getting very tight. And, he's
I
a
don't
Kennedy.
believe it. I think that there is a bit of a bias against RFK Jr., probably for really good reasons. So it'll be interesting to have a look at the debate between the two main candidates and then see what RFK brings to the table.
When you say he's unhinged, is that because of the anti-vaccine business?
Yeah, that and other things. He's a difficult one to really pin down. If you're an ideologue, if you will, either of the left or the right, no one really knows what this guy sort of stands for. He's I suppose that's not a bad thing in the scheme of things, but some of his arguments are rather strident. You raise the anti-vax thing.
Yeah.
Look, everyone's got an opinion about that. Obviously, we lost a couple of years of productivity as a consequence of all the lockdowns and things. And in hindsight, we're always that much wiser as to what should have been done, what could have been done.
Yeah.
And I think that him holding the line that vaccines are dangerous, vaccines are terrible. Well, that sets a message. It sets a message to the public that all vaccines are potentially all part of a big pharmacological
Conspiracy.
Yeah, exactly, right.
Yeah.
And that's a problem.
Yeah. There are some changes to the format with this debate. It's being run by a television station. Is it CNN?
CNN, yeah.
So they're going to turn each speaker off after he has had his say so that he cannot interject. Why not? Why not? Isn't that the entertainment factor?
Well, exactly. For us, it will be. I mean, these kind of contests are like the gladiatorial blood sports, and it's good to see if one side or the other is getting the upper hand by sheer dint of their will on the stage.
Yeah.
But this way, it's going to be so staged, managed, that you won't get the spontaneity.
Yeah.
Maybe that is something good for Biden. They're going to give him a jab of Adderall to keep him up. And just like the last State of the Union, everyone was saying, oh, my God, he has been a blithering idiot for most of the time. And all of a sudden he's eloquent and he's giving a great speech. So you can't...
Vitamin B12.
Oh, yeah. But don't forget the B1.
Well, I don't know. Did you see the first debate that he did with, what was it, in 2020?
God, hang on a second.
Is your pocket's ringing, is it?
What is going on?
I've got a telephone that dials up numbers automatically. I don't even have to be near the phone and it just starts dialing up people.
I turned this thing on Do Not Disturb, and believe me, every time I do it, it will disturb me at the most inopportune time. Anyway, so...
Look, it happens.
Yeah.
2020, when they had the first time, I think, the first time... Donald Trump had tested positive for COVID.
Yep.
So the second debate never happened.
Yep.
And the third debate was really fiery.
Yep.
Remarkable because, let's face it, Trump has got television experience. He knows how to work the room.
Correct.
And he's quite forceful when you watch him in action. Hard to compete with. But... Biden said after a screaming match of interjections. He said, "Will you shut up?" Which was hardly presidential, but anyway,
Well, look,
he won.
We will not get any of those fireworks, guaranteed. You know, when you've got everything sort of managed in a very formulaic way, okay, you know, you could say that both candidates will put forward their policy positions and it'll be very civil, no doubt. But really, again, you know, there's the fun element of it. And that's why I think, you know, once you watch this, then go onto Merritt Street and watch RFK Jr. I'm sure he'll say some stuff that most people will think, oh, my God, really? Thank goodness he'll never become president. You know,
Well, I've had him on the show, and I thought he was quite entertaining. It's a very sad thing. He's got a voice problem.
Yeah.
And it's hard to understand on the telephone.
Correct, yeah.
So it's a bit difficult.
Yeah.
What about Julian Assange?
Oh, Julian, yes.
Yeah.
Look, you know, it's a polarizing issue.
They want to make him a saint.
Well, look, you know, I would certainly say hold back on those sort of accolades, you know. But at the same time, there is an issue of democracy that sort of tends to follow the whole Assange debate. You know, yes, there is the idea that he leaked or was responsible for leaking sensitive information, national security information, which compromised the United States and potentially put certain people in jeopardy.
And that's true.
And that is true. However, is it not our right to know how our taxes are being spent in terms of how we prosecute wars, like the war in Iraq? We, you know, didn't cover ourselves in glory, and even in Afghanistan, you know, we even had our own issues with our soldiers in Afghanistan, which I'm sure the audience will know, and that is our right to know. We need to know that the people that we entrust with our national security are doing the right thing by the country. After all, there is a dividing line between an autocracy like Vladimir Putin's autocracy, where no one is accountable for anything, right? And you can go ahead and, you know, commit a war crime in the name of the state in Ukrainian town. Now, let's see if I can get the name. Bucha? Anyway, it starts with a B. And a couple of years ago, Russian soldiers had done all sorts of awful things. And we thought that kind of stuff would be stuff from the past. Why would the Russians want to do that? They've got an overwhelming military advantage, a 10-to-1 advantage apparently. Why would they have to go and terrorize civilians in that capacity? But no one except for the Western media were holding the Russians to account. For us, when we deploy our forces, those forces have even more pressure on them to behave correctly because there is the expectation that they will not commit a war crime. But governments do sometimes hide evidence from their publics in democracies. And so the question really is, was Julian Assange and Manning... that person... were they correct in releasing this information in the public good? Now, you'd say that Julian Assange is an investigative journalist, and so therefore, yes, he was justified in doing so. But you've got a lot of national security hawks out there who want to basically put him in jail and let him rot in Belmarsh.
But the evidence is there that at a time of war, people behave badly. I mean, there was the My Lai massacre, which was absolutely terrible and inexcusable, and somebody obviously leaked that. And there were all those things in Afghanistan, as you say. War desensitizes people. They lose their moral compass.
They do, but that's where our leadership has to be tougher than that and impose a sense of discipline on the soldiers moving forward, because really, if they don't, there is nothing separating us from the so-called bad guys.
I know, but we have the Geneva Conventions, which I think are wonderful. But if we were civilized enough to, you know, you can kill somebody this way, but you can't kill him that way. If we were civilized enough to have rules like that, we wouldn't go to war.
Well, that's true too. But of course, we all know that war is part of human nature. We will always fight over something, whatever that something happens to be, whether it's a piece of land, whether it's a border, whether whether
politics
it's for our survival.
Yep. No, I don't doubt that for 1 minute. Back, I can't remember how many years ago it was, but in my early days when I was at 2GB, we would have things called D-notices.
Yep, that's right.
And the D-notice just simply said, don't go there. This is there, but if you talk about it, you are committing a crime against Australia. Treason, I don't know what name they gave it, but you'd never, ever violate a D notice because you'd be out the door to start with, and you'd probably have the Secret Service on your back.
See, that was a form of self-censorship. Now, in a culture...
Imposed, it wasn't self...
Well, you knew where the boundary was.
Oh,
Let's put it this way. So you knew where the boundary was, and you would cross that boundary at your own risk.
Yes.
Now, if you were to do that deliberately, well, then the responsibility is immediately on your shoulders, and too bad. But we have now made, turned our laws into nothing. We've turned them into things that we don't abide by. We've changed them. We've weakened them. We've watered them all down. So really, in the end, a law is whatever your lawyer will interpret it as. If you can afford to have a good defense attorney, they can say, well, they weren't really breaking the law. Yeah. This is just a marginal thing. Don't worry about it. It'll all go away and you'll be free within a certain set period of time. Now, when you've got a society that has no self-discipline, is at the beck and call of social media, is at the beck and call of a whole bunch of things, and all of our institutions, including the law, is being eroded and watered down. It's become meaningless. You raise the issue of treason, for instance. It's a great point. In the real world, and I wish we lived there, but in the real world, there should be something called treason. There should be a very hard and fast expectation that if you cross a certain line, just like with the D notices, you know that whatever the responsibility is, it's not on the state to get you out of trouble. You have crossed the line. That's your problem. Yeah. You don't have that anymore. And so people don't know exactly where they stand. And even if they did, they think that the laws are so weak that they can cross over the line and do what they like and eventually get away with it.
Yeah, well, I don't know why they don't have D notices, because they did work very well for a very long time.
They did.
But you can understand people getting confused. Even that former pilot who, after having resigned his commission and entered private life, took a job in China teaching people how to fly. Now,
that raises an interesting point.
But did anyone tell him, you can't do that?
No, but in today's day and age,
we'll pay you not to do it.
It's a free market out there.
Yeah, why not?
So if the government has taken you off the teat of the state and is not paying you a good salary anymore, and you may be, I don't know, up to the hilt with mortgages, you may be having a hard time paying your bills, you may be doing whatever. We don't know what the background of this individual was. And then someone comes around with a nice paper bag of money and says, hey, listen, how would you like to come to China? All expenses paid. Here's a bag of money. And, just teach these people to fly. Yes. Well, look, it's a terrible thing to say, but in today's day and age where money is everything, you will follow the money because your individual trumps.
Well,
right?
It's free enterprise, isn't it?
It's free enterprise.
Yeah. What are you going to say?
Well, sorry to interrupt, gentlemen. Look, one of the issues with Assange is I know that much of what he released was horribly embarrassing, particularly for Hillary Clinton, and she's been one of the major proponents to try and get him, and get him particularly back to the United States. And I think had he got to the United States, probably he would never leave there. But one of the aspects which I understand to be correct is that much of the information that related to potentially putting people, operatives around the world, in danger, and this was a suggestion that was a criticism of the release of these WikiLeaks documents, that people were, secret people, lives would be put into danger because he released their names. My understanding was the WikiLeaks documents were, the names were redacted and those names weren't published. And that's my understanding, and that hasn't been made very clear at all. And John, you might like to either confirm that to your knowledge or deny it.
Well, as far as I know, Les, you're absolutely spot on. One of the reasons why Assange was allowed to walk, the Biden administration may have taken a different tact in terms of Assange's guilt, but there was apparently no person in the national security arena that was actually put at risk because of the very thing that you said. The names had been redacted. So, all right, the story broke. Was it embarrassing for the US government? Absolutely. No one wants to get caught with their pants down. It's embarrassing. The only way that they could, the US government could retaliate against a story like that was to not go after the people that committed the so-called atrocity, but go after the person, the messenger, effectively.
Who exposed it, yeah.
Right, and that, of course, in the journalistic sense, is not what a free society is about. It's like, hey, listen, government has done something wrong, whether it's military or civilian, makes no difference. You have to then stand before the court of public opinion and defend yourself. And governments are not good at doing that. So they tend to retaliate in a very nasty and personal manner against the person that ratted them out. I mean, look, I had personal experience with regard to the whole David Hicks thing, the Australian Taliban.
Oh, yes.
And, one of the things that we were talking around the table, and this is back in the day when I was working for a South Australian senator, we were talking about the fact that he's an Australian national. What responsibility does the Australian government have in terms of taking an Australian national, bringing them back to Australia and trying them before an Australian court? Now, there is an argument saying, well, we don't do that with drug runners, and if you do something terrible overseas, that's your problem, let the local authorities take care of you. But then the countervailing argument is, if you happen to be in a country that does not play by the same rules of law that you play by, you're effectively saying that you're an Australian citizen born and bred, but if you get caught doing something overseas, the right that you should have, which is being tried in Australia by an Australian court, is rescinded. Now, there are arguments on both sides of this. Yes, this is justified. No, it's not. But in the end, I think that there is a strong case to be said that if you have been caught doing something terrible, you need to be brought to account here, I think, especially when it comes to grievous assaults against so-called allied security, national security, just to show that we aren't going to allow a citizen to be just disappeared into a third party's legal framework.
Yeah, well, it does happen. It happens in China and it happens everywhere, I suppose. But it crosses my mind that Julian Assange would have known. He would have looked at the story and thought, publish and be damned, or it's too risky. I just don't think that's a bear I want to poke. He made an educated decision as to what he was going to do, and that was publish. And I think if you do the crime, you do the time.
And look, there's another thing, not to defend Assange, but there's another thing that we have to also take in consideration. When Assange committed the act, he was very young, right?
Yeah.
And as we all know, the younger you are, the more of a firebrand you are. He was already a bit of an activist in terms of pushing the bounds of, free press as much as possible. And I think that when you're in that kind of circumstance, you do and say things that when you've got a few more years on top of you, you probably think twice about, especially if you're a family person. Yeah. And, whatever your actions are, they will have an immediate impact on other people around you. Now, Julian did this. He got punished. I mean, let's face it. He did his time, and the time that was given to him was not pleasant. No. I don't know if you're...
Managed to father 2 children along the way.
Well, that is true, but, have you seen the state of his physical demeanour? He has obviously declined quite significantly.
Yes.
So...
Yeah, I agree. But
I guess, gentlemen, talking this morning, as we did, Jeremy, about Tucker Carlson being sacked by Rupert Murdoch, and then you yourself, Jeremy, being sacked by your radio station for, essentially telling the truth, being honest, and giving your personal, honest opinion.
Yeah, that's what I'm paid to do.
Jeremy, you were quite right. I 100% agree with you. She did deserve a smack on the bottom for being in a position that was at her peril, her danger. She should have said, no, I'm going home, or no, I'm not going to have more than whatever number of vodkas that she had. So there's a bit of self-control attached to all of
Well, I think there is a thing called fair comment, and you've got to be careful not to go over the top with it.
Yeah.
But looking at the ABC, for example, and the coverage that they've given the whole Assange saga is really quite amazing.
I don't think it's doing Assange any favours, though.
Possibly not, but they are sort of setting him up for, I don't know what, maybe a seat in Parliament.
I
I don't know.
I don't know.
To be
Honestly,
beatified?
Beatification would be something that the left normally does with their so-called heroes.
Yes.
But I just hope that it doesn't come to that, because none of that will actually serve him. If Assange's idea of being released from prison is to lead a quiet life and just, move on in relative obscurity.
What about Rudd turning up and the Prime Minister ringing and all of that? Is that not all a little bit over the top?
It is over the top. But I suppose if I'll make a slight political statement, and that is, I think that there is something wrong with the Albanese government in terms of allowing all of this to happen, because Assange is a divisive figure here in Australia, let alone overseas.
Yeah.
So you don't want the left to take this guy and put him on a pedestal, whether he wants the pedestal or not. Because in the end, what you're going to do is that the other people on the other side of politics are going to actually say, well, look, whether I agree with Assange or not, the fact that the left is doing all of this for Assange is offending me, and I'm going to make my presence felt either on the media or elsewhere. Mm-hmm. So what it's doing effectively is, yes, the left now have their hero status in Assange, but I don't know whether Assange really wants this or needs this. Certainly not his family. I think that basically his family will just want the whole thing to be buried, and so they can move on and have a private life. I'd be surprised if Assange puts his hand up for political office, but stranger things have happened.
What about the value of the story? Would he be? I mean, in a different age, Harry Miller would be there knocking on his door, saying, "I'm going to represent you. This story is worth."
Well, that I could see. I mean, they tried doing that with David Hicks as well. They said, "Oh, well, he's got a story to tell," but of course, they then put the kibosh on him saying what his story was. So we will never really get an understanding of what motivated him to join the Taliban. I mean, we know certain things about it, but we don't know the whole story. And of course, the entertainment industry will look at this as a potential Hollywood movie and a blockbuster, and no doubt there'll be the Netflix series coming to a station near you.
What happened to David Hicks, by the way?
Well, I think he's leading a relatively quiet life somewhere in the northern suburbs of Adelaide, as far as I understood. I mean, the last time I heard of him was many years ago, so who knows where he is now. But
Now, about this debate in America. Yeah. Now, let's say, who do you think is going to win, by the way? Dr. John Bruni from Sage International is thinking.
I'm thinking, Jeremy. It's a big question. All right, look, I'll go with what I think. I think that Trump will win, but I don't think that he'll win by much, because they both are like in many ways, especially when it comes to their cognitive abilities. So Trump by a margin.
And just quickly, will it make much difference to Australia if it's President Trump?
I think it will. I think it will. Yeah. And I think it's going to be a policy across the board, including AUKUS, which is something that we need to discuss.
We will certainly do that.
Yep.
Dr. John Bruni from Sage International, ladies and gentlemen.